is a possibility of, member countries influencing the governance within this particular institution.
They can't go to hospitals, so now the poor people have to leave their jobs and come take care of the people. So yes, they negatively affect the quality of life.
Over time, the mandate of the international financial institutions has been growing bigger.
Taxes are increased and expenditures on public goods are reduced. So they tell you, okay, so for you to be credit worthy, what you have to do, number one, you have to cut expenditure. Where do you cut expenditure? You cut expenditure on health and on education.
The most essential.
And it is possible for the Global South to actually overcome the reliance on international financial institutions.
Welcome to Regional Advocacy on regressive policies fostering inequality, a podcast that explores the impact of international financial decisions on the daily lives across Africa, on the economy across Africa. This is a podcast that is powered by Tax Justice Network Africa, and we are happy to have you. In this podcast series, I am joined here by my good friend, who is a lecturer at Jomo Kenyatta University of Science and Technology?
Agriculture and Technology.
Agriculture and Technology, Dr. Dennis Dambo. And I know we are used to doctors who have white hair, but we are happy to have you here. Please tell us a little bit more about what you do at JKUA.
Okay. Thank you, Francis. And thank you for welcoming me here today. So yes, I'm a lecturer at Jomo Kenyatta, University of Agriculture and Technology, the School of Law, which is in Karen, not Juja. And you're most welcome to join our LLB program and LLM program. But generally, our niche area is the convergence of law, science, and technology. So that's where mostly our subjects and our research and so on basically delves on. I'm also a practicing advocate of the High Court of Kenya, and mostly I try as much as possible to represent people who are facing unfairness, from either governmental policies or even unfairness in terms of their economic inequalities and so on. So that's me in a nutshell.
Thank you. I know that people may now start getting worried when we have two learned colleagues, but we will make sure that we do not give them all the legalese. I want us to talk about when taxes hurt. And there's often a human cost to bad policy, bad tax policy. And I would want you to reflect on the question of the impacts of austerity measures that are recommended by international financial institutions and the impacts that they have on public health systems across Africa, and how these austerity measures have led to cuts in public spending, especially when it comes to programs that affect vulnerable communities. Yes.
Yeah. Well, Francis, I think for Kenya, it's not really a big surprise, or it's not something new. Many of a certain generation, of course not the Gen Zs, they are rather young, may have witnessed a lot of what happened during the 1980s and 1990s. I was still young by then, but I do remember, noticing some hardships that, for example, my parents used to face. So for Kenya, it's something that actually they have gone through. And I remember at some point in time, the late President Moi complaining, "What do you want me to do?" His hands were tied by financial institutions and international donors and so on. And yet the people in the country were complaining that the government is not delivering. So really, international financial institutions, when they come to lend you money as a country, they come with conditionalities. And for them, they're giving you a loan and they expect for that loan to be repaid with interest, but they want to be assured that that loan will be repaid. So a lot of times they require you as a government to implement certain cuts to ensure that you're reducing wastage, you're reducing bloated wage bills, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So such structural areas, of course, affect particularly important social services or public services, and health is one of them.
Yeah.
And a lot of times we've seen what international financial institutions require is that the government, for example, stops, a lot of providing funding to, public health institutions. That, of course, now reduces the amount of medicines that are available, or, the staff that are employed, and so on. So that, of course, has now a greater effect on the rest of the citizens or the people in the country, such that you find, because there's reduced amount of, let's say, number of facilities, the medicines that are available, so you find even the vulnerable groups get it even harder. Because, for example, let's say people with disabilities, orphans, the aged, they not only rely on good medicines, but also nutritional. So they're already suffering from malnutrition and other things, and then now increasingly you find medicines are not available. So such policies actually do affect negatively people.
And when we speak about the vulnerable, we are speaking about those that are disabled. We are speaking about the urban poor. We are also speaking about those that are in far removed from the capitals. And in relation to that question, I think we would also want to reflect on how IFI policies impact on access to essential services, and the conditionalities that IFI loans come with. Do they really promote or hinder investment in access to essential services across Africa?
Well, unfortunately, if I start off with the second limb, unfortunately, the experience in Africa is that the policies of IFIs tend to hinder investment and in so on in essential medicines and so on. Primarily, as I mentioned earlier, the IFIs have more of an interest in ensuring that the loan gets repaid. And so the conditions that they put in place are geared towards ensuring that this money will be repaid at a certain point in time, and that actually the conditions within the country will not affect that predictability. And so you find that they tend to require the government to focus more on, let's say, profit-making ventures, or ventures that will, ensure that the government builds up its capital to be able to repay back. So, in essence, the social health, social policies, especially around public health and essential medicines, they get sacrificed because that is an area in which you're really very much trying to deal with people's health and provide them services, not necessarily gear or increase your profitability. So it really does affect access to essential medicines, such that now you find many hospitals would not have some of these essential medicines. Then the policies are also geared towards ensuring privatization. That means that more health facilities are in private hands as opposed to the government. So that means that the government has removed the amount of support for public health facilities. Private health facilities then increase. Of course, they work at cost basis, profit margins. So they increase the cost of medicines and so on. So it becomes very difficult for vulnerable groups and various categories of the society to access these essential medicines. In the flip side, it may be possible for these policies to, influence positively, access to essential medicines and, positive health incomes if they were perhaps reformulated in terms that took into account, social indicators as opposed to economic indicators.
Very true. Because when you think about the privatization of services that governments have over the years traditionally offered, when you privatize that and you put it in the hands of, let's call them capitalists, they'll aim to recoup their profits. They will aim to recoup their investments, and that often will alienate the majority of people.
That's true.
But then let's also look at it on the other side, on the political impact of IFI policies and conditionalities. And we reflect on the tax power equation, especially and would want to hear your thoughts about IFI conditions and whether they do undermine a democratic process and the exercise of sovereignty, in African countries.
Well, true. There is a ripple effect from simply affecting social services now entering into the political space. Definitely, one of the ways that you can see this is that the IFI conditionalities are placed upon the executive arm of government, and the executive arm of government goes ahead to implement those conditionalities that they've been given. So they do not necessarily pass through parliament, where they can get some form of debate and discussion and legitimization and so on. No, it's primarily done by the executive arm of government. And you see not much of the executive arm of government has been elected into office. There's a lot of appointments and so on. So in that sense, you find that the IFIs themselves are directly imposing conditions on the people without any form of legitimate connection to the people. So it does involve quite a lot of reduction of a sovereignty of a country, because the government itself is not making independent decisions. It's being coerced into making certain conditions. And that especially undermines the political stability of the country. In addition, now with the leaders themselves having to impose such unpopular policies, you find that there's quite a lot of pushback from the citizenry themselves. And so it actually destabilizes the political space for the government and the people as well.
Drawing from your last thought, about when you come up with policies that are unpopular, and there's often going to be a lot of public backlash, against governments that are introducing reforms that may not be very popular. And we've seen, different governments, navigating such backlash differently. We would want you to reflect a little bit about that.
Of course, it's a difficult situation for governments to, have to do this, because, at the end of the day, they would like for the country to come out of perhaps the situation it is in, the dire situation. But at the same time, the people are not happy with those measures that are being put in place. So many times, most governments would tend to try and publicize perhaps the positives that would come from such initiatives. So there's maybe some public education forums, some engagement in some sense, sending perhaps elected leaders to go and try and sell these policies to the people and so on. That's one way. Other ways is perhaps they try to sort of implement some policies so that they look like they're actually adhering to the conditions given to them by the IFIs, and then sometimes possibly not implement others, which perhaps just to sort of to show that they're still trying to, or they are still on the side of the people themselves. So it's quite a tightrope for them to walk through, but I've seen a couple of countries trying to do the same. Even high office holders such as the president coming out and visiting various parts of the country to just try and explain we're doing this for the benefit of the country and so on.
And there's also the age-old tactic of buying the opposition, ensuring that you also reduce the heat that could come from political parties that may be opposed to government policies.
Indeed.
But then as we continue reflecting, it would be good to cast our eye forward and think about the future and what we call a just tax future, and what progressive taxation could look like. And my question to you, how can we ensure that a global financial governance is actually being reformed in a way that prioritizes social justice and economic equity?
Thank you for that. And I think that's a question that doesn't get quite as much attention as it deserves. And there is a lot of work being done by various, let's say, global South countries, okay? What we initially perhaps used to be called the third world. They're reaching across different forums and trying to, as much as possible, to come up with ways of making the international tax system a bit fairer. A good forum is the United Nations General Assembly, where at least right now they're trying to, come up with a convention on taxation. And the push is really being done by the global South countries that have felt the brunt of IFI conditionalities and so on. Another way is, of course, maybe trying to reform some of these institutions. So if we had greater representation of in global South countries in the IFIs themselves, that would really help. A contrast is drawn between the membership of the UN General Assembly and the membership of these IFIs, because at the UN General Assembly, every state, no matter how small, is represented and has the same one vote as a big state or a powerful state at the General Assembly. But with the IFIs, it's based on special drawing rights, or shareholding, so to speak. So the more powerful states have larger number of drawing rights compared to the smaller states. So we need to reform these institutions. Then other ways is, of course, ensuring that we amplify the voices of, the inconveniences and hardships created by these IFI conditionalities and so on.
And as we have a future of reformed IFIs, civil society organizations, do they have a role, and what could they do in promoting accountability in how IFIs deal with our governments? Actually, the space is quite wide for civil society organizations. And drawing from the last point that I just made, amplifying voices. Civil society organizations have, many avenues for them to be able to just speak up about the hardships that people are facing, to actually have evidence-based research showing that because of these conditionalities, this is why we have this poverty or this amount of number of sicknesses or deaths and so on. So civil society organizations are able to really have their voice heard in different forums, be it at the international level, at regional level, and even within the country themselves. Tied also with the reports that they can issue and provide. For example, with the monitoring mechanisms on human rights. For example, they provide shadow reports when it comes to the committee on, let's say, discrimination against women, the committee on civil and political rights. These organizations are able to speak up and mention these problems that are happening. And how we have operated, across Africa is almost as if there are no alternatives. That it is either IFI funding or nothing. And we have often been asking ourselves, in promoting equitable development, do we only have to rely on IFIs? Are there alternatives? Are there choices, especially for African countries?
That's a good question, Francis. And you're right. We really need to tap into our own heritage, for example, as the African continent. If we go back as, just 2,000 years ago, if we mention the great kingdoms in Africa, from even the richest person on earth, Mansa Musa from, Ghana and so on, who spent a lot of gold when he traveled to Europe and so on. We have a deep heritage of wealth within our continent. And so I think the first place that we can tap into is within ourselves, South to South cooperation in terms of trade, and mining and extractive industries and so on. Basically, if we engage with each other, there's a lot that we can assist with each other. So we need to stop this suspicion and selfishness that as the global South countries we have. Secondly, also, we can also tap into other emerging economies, like the BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and so on, and South Africa now joining. Those are other avenues that we can use because they are at a better place compared to other global South countries. We can reach out to them. But most of all, also domestic mobilization is possible within these countries, there's a great inequality gap, the wealth gap between the rich and the poor. Just 10% of the population controlling a huge amount of the wealth within a country.
Yeah.
If there was a way of actually encouraging them to invest more within the country with the people, to mobilize, and even the rest of the people with the little that they have. We've seen it with the small and medium and micro enterprises, the way they're able to mobilize funds just at the grassroots level. It is amazing, and it's possible for us to mobilize domestically to raise our capital and help, as opposed to relying upon IFIs.
Yeah, and I'm sure that you can also, just adding around that point, look at the impact of using our resources, our natural resources better.
Yes.
But also the role of strengthening African-based financial institutions.
True.
Yeah, maybe you can reflect a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I mean, we have now regional development banks and so on that, the states in Africa have come up with.
Yeah.
So those are also other sources of potential funding that we can use.
Yeah.
And coming up, as you mentioned, better ways of using the resources that we have would also, in the long term, ensure that we have savings in some way and we are able to tap in. And also emphasizing on the sovereignty that we have of our natural resources.
Yeah.
We need to reach a place where we believe that it is better for us to manage our resources as opposed to selling them for short-term benefits. Yeah.
And exporting them raw.
Exactly. Exactly. We should be able to, improve, use the raw materials to come up with high-value products within our country.
Yeah.
And see how we can also engage, for example, within the African continent with the AFCFTA now. We should be actually having more trade based on high-value goods, as opposed now to relying upon trade agreement with the US and the UK and the European Union and so on.
Yeah, and people often, ask that question about our ability to feed ourselves.
Yeah.
I think it is still unfair for a continent that has, a lot of arable land to actually be depending on financing to build our food systems. Yeah, maybe you could also comment a little about, ensuring that we are finding a way of sustaining ourselves when it comes to food, so that we stop over relying on financial institutions out there.
Okay. Yeah, that's right. I think a lot of that is tied to unfair, land rights and property systems within the various African countries.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, a lot of arable land is held within the hands of a few multinational corporations or the ruling elite in many of these African countries.
Along the same lines of reforms, there's a role that IFIs themselves have in terms of looking inward and promoting reforms of IFIs that help to better support social development and tax justice across Africa. Please reflect a little bit about that, the role of IFIs themselves in how they reform their policies. It's something that is possible and doable. These international financial institutions need to sort of change their approach to dealing with providing aid and fiscal support and so on. And a lot of it has to do with looking at things from a more social perspective, a more human rights perspective, a more perspective that deals with addressing inequality in society and so on. So they need to realize the amount of time that they have been in place of the 70 years or so that they've been in place. There's evidence that actually what they've been doing has been unfair and is causing greater problems. So they need to refocus and look at more human rights approaches and socially perspectives that would improve outcomes, and then look more long term. They should be thinking about investing in more long term solutions as opposed to short term gains. And then also they need to work with the local people themselves, come up with solutions with them. It's sort of like a bottom approach, if we can call it that. Look at what actually the conditions on the ground, how people are affected, and what solutions can work. Because it's not a matter of one size solution fits to all. Very true.
Different countries are different circumstances, and they need to work with the people themselves to come up with ways to better come up with solutions that assist them. Definitely.
Yeah, I think in the reforms of IFIs, there is also the question of how they are governed, and you had alluded to it earlier when you spoke about voting rights, for example, and finding that a continent that has over 50 countries having lesser drawing rights than just one country. Somewhere in the global south, global north. Maybe you could also reflect about improving governance within IFIs towards a better future.
It's true. The global south countries can work within the system to try and sort of improve their governance, and a lot of it has to do with solidarity and unity. This Pan-Africanism approach that we have can work in different places, and even in these international financial institutions. There is a way that the countries themselves can force reforms within the system. And we've seen it in different ways, such as, for example, with the World Trade Organization negotiations. And the different rounds, you find that African countries do not cede ground, and they insist that they're not going to allow unfair practices upon them, and they stick together. Some of the reforms in the United Nations themselves have been due to the African countries and Asian countries coming together and voting and saying that we want to reform this or that. In fact, even the World Bank, for example, and International Finance Corporation, they've the member countries have come up with standards for them to be implementing when it comes to, let's say, land acquisition. Whenever a government needs land to resettle or for an infrastructure project, they have come up with environmental and social frameworks. They've come up with performance standards. So there is a possibility of member countries influencing the governance within these particular institutions.
Yeah, thank you, Doctor. It's been a great pleasure to have you on this podcast. And I know that you would want to, at least as we wrap up, provide just a summation and maybe just a way forward, anything that you might want to leave for our followers and viewers.
What I think I can emphasize is that it's difficult, but it's possible.
Yes.
And especially if global South countries realize, for example, that the dominant narrative that has been, given to them doesn't hold water. The global South countries are the majority membership in various international institutions. They can use that majority membership to, create different policies through these international financial institutions. They can come together through the various cooperation mechanisms for them to improve their economic and social and political situation. And it is possible for the global South to actually overcome the reliance on international financial institutions.
Thank you. And we look forward to having you again on yet another podcast.
Thank you, Francis. I look forward to it.
Thank you. Thank you for following and watching regional advocacy on regressive policies that foster inequality. Stay tuned to learn more about how we can promote a just, people-centered future for Africa. Follow us, subscribe, and share this podcast. Thank you.